Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
To another edition of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. It's a real pleasure to welcome back an old friend of mine, and she's been on the show before. Colleen Moriarty is the Executive Director of Hunger Solutions Minnesota. Colleen, welcome back to Access to Democracy.
Thank you, Steve. I'm pleased to be back and always glad to see you.
Thank you. You've spent most of your career fighting poverty and engaged in efforts to get public policies that help people in the fight against poverty. I'm curious, what or who inspired you in your career path?
Well, I think two things inspired me. The first was my father, who was very politically active. Our whole family had been politically active. My grandfather had run for Congress and was a district court judge in Scott County. My father used to ask me when at the close of a day what I had done for someone else today. So it was an important question, but it's because it took you out of yourself, and it was a goal to meet every day. And so I really that has stuck with me.
And your father was an attorney too, right?
He was an attorney in
years.
Minneapolis,
Right.
Yes.
That's good inspiration, I would say. So tell us just briefly, if you could, give our viewers an idea, what is the mission of Hunger Solutions Minnesota?
Hunger Solutions is organized around the issue of fair and just public policy to serve people who are food insecure. And in addition to that, we work on everything from birth to death as far as hunger issues, the early childhood issues and WIC, the school meals.
And WIC is?
Women, Infants, and Children program, and then the National School Lunch program and School Lunch in Minnesota, the food shelves issues, working with the food banks and senior meals, and everything that you can imagine that has anything to do with hunger.
And just so our viewers understand too, that Hunger Solutions Minnesota, some people may think, oh, it's a food bank. You're not really a food bank, are you?
No.
But you do connect people who have need. You can help connect them to food bank, and we're going to talk about some of the ways you do that.
Right. Well, we don't really connect people to food banks. We connect them to food
shelves. Yeah, where they can actually go and get food that they need to feed their families.
So we have a very active helpline that's been a part of our organization for the last 10 years, and that is available to anyone. We get calls from all counties throughout the state of Minnesota looking for food resources.
And just to give folks an idea of the scope, the infrastructure for fighting hunger in Minnesota, how many food shelves are there in the state of Minnesota?
Almost 400 now. And so those local locations are what people know. That probably has volunteers from that they know, and that it's a trusted place in the community that they can go and ask for help.
And of course, one of the largest is right here in Egan and Viking Lakes. We have the Open Door Food Pantry. We've had Jason Viana has been our guest recently on the show.
Right, he's wonderful, and that program is absolutely trailblazing.
And tremendous number of volunteers and initiatives they have going on in the community. I know they have an event coming up very soon with Cub Foods, a partnership with Cub Foods. Bagging, super bagging, I think it's called.
Yeah.
That's going to happen on the same weekend as the Super Bowl.
Oh, cool.
Looking for volunteers to help bag groceries and then getting tips that can be donated to the Open Door and support its work.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so a lot of things going on there. So let's circle back to the Minnesota Food HelpLine. Kind of walk us through, how does that work when somebody is seeking assistance?
Well, we have an extensive data bank that we draw on. We have all the information about where food shelves are, when they're open, and so when people call, sometimes they say, I think I could qualify for SNAP.
Which is
a Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which used to be food stamps.
Right.
And so what we do is we run them through a screening to find if they are eligible for the program. And then we go through the application with them and mail that out to them or help them get online with the state. But we can't determine whether or not someone actually gets benefits. That's up to the local county.
Right. But this is a way to connect people with what they need.
Right.
And would I be correct if I were to say that this may be a more difficult issue, connecting people in rural communities in greater Minnesota to food resources just because of geography, that they may
Right.
be in a rural area where they're farther away perhaps from the nearest town where they can get help?
Yes, that's true. And then in many cases, if the senior population, particularly in rural areas, they don't have access to transportation to, say, a regional big box store where they could actually get groceries, and many of the grocery stores in the local towns have closed. So that's
and many
an issue.
of the people may not have cars, or
Right.
may no longer drive,
May
or
no
they
longer
have
drive.
medical issues that prevent them from being mobile and being able to get out to those places.
Exactly.
Yeah, real important. Tell us, what does your food shelf capacity program do? I saw that on your website
Right.
too.
We do training. We do emergency operations kind of issues. We connect them to resources for additional equipment. So there's and really building capacity is about working and organizing in local communities so that we can have more people who are taking resources from the local community to tell their story. So we have a lot of training on storytelling.
And you have something called Market Bucks program.
Right, very,
what is the
very
Market
popular.
Bucks program?
So last summer there were 99 farmers markets throughout the state who accepted Market Bucks, and it is an amplifier for the fresh fruits and vegetables. So you can get up to $10 in a match if you're on SNAP and you go to the farmers market, and it's very, very helpful for people, and it brings in support to the local farmers, and it supports the local community. We're now looking at how we can generate that idea, but use it in grocery stores throughout the state of Minnesota for fresh fruits and vegetables.
I'm thinking this seems like a win-win here, because
Absolutely.
just what you mentioned about this is a win not only for the people getting the food, but also for the local economy in some of these areas too, where it's
Absolutely.
benefiting farmers and communities that are making money.
And that's true of SNAP too. SNAP is an amplifier in local communities because someone receives the benefits and they spend that in their local community buying groceries, which is an amplifier for economic development.
That's a really important point, it seems to me, Colleen, because we have heard, unfortunately, any number of politicians who have really tried to kind of weaponize this issue in the sense they say, well, you're just giving away money to people. But this idea of the economic multiplier effect, it's not only good public policy in terms of feeding people and making sure they get what they need, but it has an economic benefit too to those communities. Am I understanding that correctly?
It does. Yeah. And as far as the SNAP program goes, there is no cash exchanged. You can't get cash off an EBT card. It's all food, and it has to be food that needs to be prepared. It can't be any prepared food, and it can't be any personal care items or paper towels, or it has to be only
So
food.
you can't use it to go into Perkins and order lunch. You have to go to a store.
But you know, as a matter of fact, the prepared meals or the prepared foods in grocery stores has been an issue for a long time because there are people who either don't have kitchen capacity, can't cook anymore, or are disabled, and they have a difficult time using SNAP as a benefit. So what we've looked at is everybody around the country calls it the rotisserie chicken bill, because it would allow someone to buy prepared foods that they could then consume but not have to prepare. And there's a great deal of interest in that for the next Farm Bill.
That's very interesting because a lot of people don't think about that aspect of it. People who they may not be in a situation where they're living independently or alone and they can't prepare their food anymore.
Right.
Yeah, very interesting. So if you could, can you sort of describe for our viewers what is the scope of the hunger problem in Minnesota? How many people in Minnesota are hungry? Do we have data that's reliable that can give us some insight into the scope of this problem?
Well, we maintain, along with the food shelves and the banks, we maintain the data about how many people visit food shelves. So last year there were 7 million visits to food shelves in the state of Minnesota. That's up almost 2 million from the year before.
That's not 7 million people, but it's number of visits.
Right, 7 million visits.
Okay.
So that's extraordinary.
And your website states, when I was looking at the Hunger Solutions Minnesota website, right now 1 in 9 Minnesotans are food insecure. That's nearly 500,000 Minnesotans, nearly 500,000 of our fellow citizens in a state that is, you know, for a lot of people, a very affluent place to live.
And an agricultural state.
And an agricultural state. That's kind of a shocking figure, isn't it?
Well, you know, that's compiled by the USDA, so, and I think it's very accurate. You know, there's currently about 380,000 people on SNAP, but people who are on SNAP, it's a supplemental program. It's not designed to meet everyone's needs. So they also probably visit a food shelf to be able to have, you know, personal care items or paper towels or whatever it is they need, additional food. So they actually, being hungry requires you to weave together all those different experiences to meet your needs. Know where the food shelf is. If you need a meal program, knowing where that meal is coming from, maintaining your benefits, using them on the appropriate things, going to a farmer's market. You're weaving all of those different resources together.
When we had Jason Viana from the Open Door food shelf here in Eagan was on our program recently, and he made an interesting observation that years ago, the idea of the local food shelf, it was people donating canned goods. But in recent times, there's been much more of an emphasis on something you alluded to earlier about fresh fruit and vegetables. And, if you will, a healthier diet, which helps improve health outcomes, especially for kids who are still developing. And doesn't that help them do better in school if they're well fed, too?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I would say in the 20 years that I've been in this position, one of the biggest changes that I've seen is food shelves move away from the box of food that used to be given to people in the early 80s. And some Hmong people would get that box of food and go, what is ragu and white bread and peanut butter? They had
no way to relate
no
to what
idea
that
of how
was.
you would use that. So now there are fresh fruits and vegetables. They are laid out and marketed in the way like a supermarket would. There's a choice model that's implied that people have so many points and they can choose what they're going to eat and what their family will eat. They can put together a meal from the things that are there.
Right. So we hear this term frequently among anti-hunger advocates such as yourself, talking about food insecurity or being food insecure. Can you help us drill down on that a little bit? What does that mean to be food insecure?
It simply means you don't know where your next meal is coming from.
Mm-hmm. And the people who are food secure, there's often an assumption that, well, they don't want to work, or they're homeless, or they're unemployed. Now, there may be a few people in that group too, but isn't it a fact that a lot of the people who visit food shelves are in fact working?
Oh yes,
they're working families.
Over 60% of the people who visit food shelves are employed, and a large portion of that 40% that's left are seniors who are retired and on a fixed income.
And the food shelves, of course, serving working families, that means also they're serving a huge number of children in our state as well, too.
Absolutely.
So it's important for people when they think about the scope of hunger in Minnesota that we think about it in these broader terms rather than stereotyping people who come to the food bank.
That's so true. I think that has I hope that we've had some kind of success on educating people on what hunger really is, and what it means for their local community and for their neighbors.
In addition to the nuts and bolts of things like the Minnesota Food HelpLine, the food shelf capacity, market bucks, these things we've been talking about, Colleen, another important aspect of the work you do, and in fact it's how you and I first met and became friends over a decade ago now. It's hard to believe it's been that long. Actually more like
I think it's more,
15 years, 20 years maybe. An important part of your work also involves advocacy.
Right.
Tell our viewers what we're talking about when we say advocacy.
Well, you know, when I introduce myself in a group, I say I work with Hunger Solutions and I'm an advocate. And I rarely say I'm the executive director, because I think the important thing for people to know is that that is my passion. I am an advocate on behalf of people who need assistance of some kind. Being an advocate really means that you are organizing, educating local communities, that you are at the legislature testifying, that you are bringing someone who's at the food shelf to the legislature to tell their story. That could be on the local level, it could be on the state level, it could be on the federal level. And I've done all of those things within my career span in the Hunger Initiative.
One of my fondest memories working at the Council of Nonprofits when I was federal policy director there was going to Washington, D.C. with you and seeing you at work with the rest of our group when we visited the Minnesota congressional delegation, and how important that is to tell the story of what the need is, and better yet to have the people who are most immediately affected tell their story, like you mentioned, getting witnesses to testify at legislative hearings in St. Paul or to talk to their members of Congress, because policymakers can't make good decisions if they don't have good information.
Absolutely.
And if they don't understand what the need is in their community. And, you know, somebody once said to me years ago, they said, anybody can put together a program, but not everyone can put together a program that works and addresses the actual needs that people have. Isn't that true?
That is very true.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody can put together a program. I mean, I think there is skill about putting together programs that serve people, but the fact of the matter is, everything that we do at Hunger Solutions is from the ground up. We establish a legislative agenda with the community. We build in their wants and their needs through organizations and individuals to build that legislative agenda. So by the time we've established it and are ready to go in the legislative session, we know who our partners are, and they are a wide swath.
Which leads me right into the next question I have for you today. You have been participating all these years in a group called Partners to End Hunger. In fact, I think that's where you and I first met.
Yes, I think
on these issues. Tell us, what are the Partners to End Hunger? Who are they and what do they do?
The Partners to End Hunger is a group that meets every Friday during the legislative session. They were a part of this pod that put together the legislative agenda. They represent different organizations like the Children's Defense Fund, AARP, healthcare interests.
Faith community?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Education organizations, the stewardship programs, the public land for the Trust for Public Land. I mean, we are trying to bring everyone together: agriculture, education, healthcare, all the basic needs funding, and bring people in who can share with us some skills that we can use at the legislature.
I think what I learned in working with you and the other anti-hunger advocates 10, 15 years ago was, again, underlining something that I kind of knew before, but it really reinforced this belief on my part that the best results you get fighting hunger are when you work with partners who share your concern and you develop these broad coalitions, because any of us out there on our own, it's hard to do that.
Absolutely.
But when you work with other people who are like-minded and are passionate about addressing human needs, it can be so powerful, and we've seen that. We saw a really good example of this in one of your greatest victories in anti-hunger advocates this past year. The Minnesota legislature passed universal school lunch.
Right.
Say a word about what happened
breakfast
there.
and lunch. And
breakfast and lunch.
I had worked on that issue for 17 years, so it's very close to my heart, because we started out focusing on trying to rid the process from shame-based with the denying kids lunch because they had a overdue bill, and collection agencies going after parents, and
and kids caught up in
yes. And so we started working with legal aid 17 years ago about how it is we could establish laws to prevent that from happening. And Steve, we passed 2 laws, and it still persisted. So the best way to get rid of all of that, all of those ill effects, is to have everyone be at the same level at school lunch and school breakfast. And we had the trifecta. They were supportive. The governor and the lieutenant governor were amazing, and we had educated people through the years, and we were successful. And it is my personal drop the mic moment.
When I saw the signing ceremony, and I saw you in the audience there when Governor Walz signed this into law, and he was just beaming.
Oh, he's
and there was an
thrilled.
audience of kids there too, and he was so proud to sign that bill. I think it's one of the signature achievements of the last session for sure, but maybe one of the most important things Minnesota has done, because again, we're a leader in fighting against hunger. We're a leader in providing meals for kids and getting rid of this, as you call it, lunch shaming issue. Now, some critics of it, though, have said, well, wait a minute, why should Minnesota taxpayers be paying for lunches for kids who come from families that can afford it? And something that occurred to me, basically saying it should be means tested, but I started thinking, local government school boards provide buses to carry kids to school.
Exactly.
We don't ask the parents who come from families that can afford to pay a fee to pay extra for riding the bus to school. So why would we do it with respect to a nutrition program for kids?
Absolutely. I think or books, or, I think that's even fair. And yesterday, the Secretary of Agriculture was in town, and I was part of a small group that met with him. And, we talked about the Universal Lunch Program and Universal Breakfast, and he congratulated us on this hallmark move. So it felt really good.
It's a great thing. So Minnesota, once again, the North Star, leading the way, shining the light on the leading the way. Food shelf grant funding. How much and how many grants does Hunger Solutions help provide to food shelves?
It was raised last year during the legislative session by an additional $2 million. So it's now $4.6 million a year. And grants cannot go over $175,000. There's a range.
So it's pretty modest.
Yeah, but it's, it's something people can count on,
right?
And it's very important to keeping everything going.
And I think people should remember too, when the pandemic hit, this event that we had not seen in America for 100 years, and huge dislocations to the economy, to the workplace, to our schools. There were a lot of programs created to try to address those immediate human needs in the wake of the pandemic, but most of those have expired now.
Right.
And so, it's easy to say, well, there used to be more assistance for some of these programs, and now there's no reason to justify continuing them. But hunger has been a persistent problem in our communities in good times and in bad times.
Absolutely. And I think that actually worked to our benefit with the school meals, because during the pandemic, school meals were distributed by the school districts to people in local communities. And so we knew that we could do that, and that became a real selling point.
We're getting down to our last 2 minutes. Tell our viewers real quick, in the anti-hunger community, we use a lot of acronyms, right? SNAP, WIC. What is TFAP? What does that stand for, and what is it?
The Emergency Food Assistance Program, and that is commodities that are purchased by the USDA and distributed through the food banks and the food shelves to people who need food. And it is, some people, if they can remember back to when the cheese was first distributed, that this program now has grown to be one of the most effective and healthiest products on the shelves. It's a mainstay of the shelves.
Very important. Colleen, you are going to be stepping down after a long and distinguished career leading Hunger Solutions and helping, title of our show today, Winning Minnesota's Food Fight.
Right.
Nobody has been more in the front lines than you, perhaps. What are your thoughts as you step down? What do you see as the biggest challenges that we're facing in the fight against hunger over the next year or so, next couple of years?
Well, I think that the rising numbers of people who visit food shelves is always a great concern to me. And I think part of that was coming out of COVID, and part of it was inflation. And, there's a lot of different factors. But I think that the continuing recognition of the fact that the food shelves and the programs and the food that they represent are a vital part of the community and a very well respected part of the community, and people should know that.
Colleen Moriarty, I for one will congratulate you on your retirement and wish you the best in your future endeavors, and it has been a tremendous honor having worked with you in the past. Thank you for being our guest on Access to Democracy.
Absolutely, Steve. It's a great honor. Thank you so much.